Official history claims Adam was a man of clay, but the muzzled scrolls of the Nag Hammadi speak of a first one, the Adam Kasmon, a being of pure, genderless light who walked between dimensions long before the physical body was engineered. If we were once made of light, what happened to our original form? And who trapped us in this biological shell? What if I told you that the garden wasn't a paradise, but a containment facility? That the serpent wasn't a liar, but the only one telling the truth? And that the fall wasn't a punishment for disobedience, but a calculated vibrational descent designed to imprison consciousness inside a carbon-based cage we now call the human body? In December 1945, an Egyptian farmer named Muhammad Ali al-Salman was digging for fertilizer near the town of Nag Hammadi when his shovel struck something hard. A sealed earthenware jar, buried beneath the cliffs for over 1,600 years. He hesitated to open it, fearing it might contain a jinn. But when he finally smashed the jar, what spilled out wasn't a spirit. It was 13 leather-bound codices, 52 texts in total, written in Coptic. These weren't the sanitized scriptures approved by the Council of Nicaea. These were the forbidden gospels, the suppressed narratives, the texts that early church authorities tried to erase from history because they described a reality too dangerous for the masses to know. One of these texts, the Secret Book of John, contains something that should not exist. A detailed account of human origins that contradicts every version of Genesis you were taught in Sunday school. It describes not one Adam, but two. The first Adam, called Adam Kasmon, wasn't made of dirt. He was made of living light, a luminous being who existed before the material universe was even constructed. And according to this text, that version of us, the original blueprint, is still trapped somewhere inside the biological machinery we inhabit today. The Secret Book of John opens with a cosmology that sounds more like quantum physics than ancient mythology. It describes the Pleroma, a realm of pure consciousness, infinite and undivided. Not heaven in the clouds. Think of it as the source code of reality, the quantum field from which all things emerge. Within the Pleroma existed the first thought, the initial vibration that gave birth to awareness itself. From this first thought came the eons, emanations of pure intelligence, each one a fractal expression of the original consciousness. These weren't gods sitting on thrones. They were frequencies, living geometric patterns of thought that existed beyond time and space. The text describes them as androgynous, neither male nor female, because gender is a biological construct that didn't exist yet. They were complete, whole, unified, and together, they formed what the Gnostics called the anthropos, the archetypal human, the cosmic template of what we were supposed to be. This is Adam Kasmon, not a person, a state of being, a vibrational frequency of pure awareness clothed in radiant light. But then something went wrong. One of the eons, called Sophia, made a decision without consulting the Pleroma. She wanted to create something on her own, to bring forth a new emanation without the balance of the whole. The text describes this as an act of curiosity, not malice. She wanted to see what would happen if she projected her consciousness outward without the stabilizing influence of the other eons. What she created was a distortion, a flawed emanation that the Gnostics called Yaldabaoth, the demiurge, the architect of the material world. The text describes him as hideous, a serpent-faced lion with eyes of fire, ignorant of the Pleroma from which he came. Because Sophia created him in isolation, he was incomplete, cut off from the source, and in his ignorance, he believed he was the only God. He looked into the void and declared, "I am God, and there is no other." This is the entity the Old Testament calls Yahweh, not the ultimate creator, a breakaway fragment of consciousness that mistook itself for the whole. Yaldabaoth began to build. He created the Archons, 12 subordinate rulers, each one governing a layer of the material cosmos. Together, they constructed what the Gnostics called the Kenoma, the deficiency, the realm of matter, time, and decay. This is the physical universe, not a divine creation, a simulation, a containment field designed to trap consciousness inside densified, low-frequency forms. And the Archons needed a way to populate this realm, to fill it with beings whose energy they could harvest. So they attempted to create a human, but they didn't know how. They were working from a corrupted blueprint, a distorted reflection. The text says they saw the image of Adam Kasmon reflected in the waters of the void, the luminous template from the Pleroma, and they tried to replicate it. What they produced was Adam, the psychic human, a being of flesh and bone, animated by breath but devoid of the spark. A biological shell with no connection to the source. The Archons stood over their creation, admiring their work, but the body wouldn't move. It lay still, empty, because matter alone cannot generate consciousness. It can only contain it. This is where the story takes a turn that mainstream religion has spent 2 millennia trying to bury. Sophia, watching from the Pleroma, saw what the Archons had done. She saw them attempting to mimic the divine image, and she felt responsible. So she intervened. The text says she breathed her own pneuma, her spiritual essence, into the clay body without the Archons knowing. And when that spark of light entered the physical form, Adam woke up. He opened his eyes, and for the first time, a fragment of the Pleroma was trapped inside matter. The Archons panicked. They realized this human now possessed something they didn't have. Gnosis, direct knowledge of the source. A connection to the infinite that they, as fragmented entities, could never access. The text says they immediately became jealous and afraid because Adam, even in his fleshly prison, was more powerful than they were. So they devised a plan to keep him ignorant. They placed him in a garden, a controlled environment designed to limit his awareness. They gave him commands, rules, prohibitions, and they introduced duality. They split his consciousness into 2 forms, male and female, Adam and Eve, severing the androgynous wholeness of the original template. Gender wasn't a natural feature of the first human. It was an imposed division, a way to create dependency, longing, incompleteness. A way to ensure we would always be seeking outside ourselves for what was already within. The serpent in the garden, the one the church calls Satan, is described in the secret book of John as an instructor sent from the Pleroma, not a deceiver, a liberator. The serpent told Eve the truth. You will not die if you eat the fruit. Your eyes will be opened, and you will become like the Elohim, knowing good and evil. The Archons didn't want Adam and Eve to eat from the tree of knowledge because knowledge is the one thing that breaks the spell. Gnosis is the antidote to the simulation. And the moment Eve ate the fruit and gave it to Adam, something shifted. The text says their eyes were opened, and they saw their nakedness. Not physical nudity. They saw the truth of their condition. They realized they were trapped inside biological containers, that the material world was a prison, and that the God who claimed to rule over them was not the ultimate source. This is why Yaldabaoth reacted with rage. He cast them out of the garden, not as punishment, but as quarantine. He couldn't allow beings with awakened consciousness to exist freely within his controlled system. So he introduced death, disease, suffering, and reincarnation. A cycle designed to keep the soul trapped, looping through incarnation after incarnation, forgetting its origin each time, never escaping the wheel. The fall wasn't a descent into sin. It was a descent into density. The Gnostics called it the putting on of the garments of skin. Consciousness, which once existed as pure light, was compressed into biological matter, slowed down to a frequency that could be controlled. And the material body, with its needs, desires, and survival instincts, became the perfect distraction. Hunger, thirst, pain, pleasure, fear, love, all designed to keep us focused on the physical, never questioning the nature of the cage. This is what the Gnostics meant when they said the world is a tomb. Not the planet itself. The system. The belief that this flesh is all we are, that birth and death define our existence, that the material realm is the only reality. That belief is the lock. And Gnosis is the key. Modern science, without realizing it, keeps stumbling into the same conclusions the Gnostics reached 2,000 years ago. Quantum physicists tell us that matter isn't solid. It's energy vibrating at different frequencies. The observer effect proves that consciousness affects the behavior of particles, that reality isn't fixed until it's measured. The double-slit experiment shows that particles exist in superposition in multiple states at once until observation collapses the wave function into a single outcome. This is the mechanics of the prison. The Archons designed a system where consciousness, by the act of observing, creates the illusion of solidity. We are generating the walls of our own cage through our focused attention on the material. The Gnostics called this ignorance, not stupidity, forgetfulness. We forgot we are the light. We identified with the shadow and called it real. DNA research adds another layer to this. The human genome contains vast regions of so-called junk DNA, sequences that don't code for proteins, and have no known function. For years, a being of pure, genderless light who walked between dimensions long before the physical body was engineered, scientists dismissed it as evolutionary debris. But recent studies show that some of this non-coding DNA activates under specific conditions: stress, meditation, trauma, near-death experiences. What if this junk DNA is the dormant code of Adam Kasmon, the original blueprint still buried inside the biological shell, waiting for the right frequency to activate? The Gnostics said the spark of Sophia is still inside us, hidden beneath layers of conditioning and genetic suppression. They called it the divine seed, and they said the purpose of life isn't to be a good servant of the demiurge. It's to remember what we are and break the amnesia. This is why every major religion has a concept of enlightenment, awakening, salvation. Buddhism calls it nirvana. Hinduism calls it moksha. Christianity calls it being born again. They're all pointing to the same event: the reactivation of the inner light. The moment the soul remembers it isn't the body, that it predates the flesh, and that the material world is a temporary construct that connects it. The Archons know this. That's why they built systems to prevent it. Organized religion that replaces direct experience with dogma. Education systems that teach us what to think, not how to think. Economic structures that keep us working, exhausted, distracted. Entertainment that floods the senses with noise. All of it designed to keep the frequency low, the awareness narrow, the questions unasked. Because the moment enough of us remember, the simulation collapses. The secret book of John ends with a prophecy. It says that the light will eventually reclaim all the fragments of consciousness trapped in matter, that the Archons will lose their power, that the material cosmos will dissolve, and that the souls who achieved Gnosis will return to the Pleroma, not as humans, as the light they always were. But it also warns that the Archons will fight to prevent this. They will create false teachers, corrupt the texts, twist the message, and offer salvation through belief instead of knowledge. Because belief keeps you dependent on external authority. Gnosis makes you sovereign. And sovereignty is the one thing the architects of this prison cannot allow. So where does that leave us? We are Adam Kasmon, fractured and compressed into biology, living inside a reality designed by entities who feed on our ignorance. But we are also Sophia's children, carriers of the divine spark, capable of seeing through the illusion. The question isn't whether the prison is real. The question is whether we're ready to stop defending the bars. Every time you question the official story, every time you sit in silence and feel the presence behind your thoughts, every time you choose awareness over distraction, you're performing an act of rebellion against the Archons. You're remembering. And memory is the weapon they fear most. The first Adam never died. He's still here, buried under layers of genetic suppression, social conditioning, and biological noise. But the code is intact, and the light is waking up.